What the hell? Africa's deadliest animal, the hippopotamus? This is a fact that I've heard quite often, though sometimes I feel like I've been gaslit by this and it's something I've made up, because I can't remember where I first heard it. It was probably on one of those world's deadliest shows that Nat Geo, Discovery or Animal Planet used to run in the 2000s. They're usually the ones to blame. But it can't be true, can it? First of all, I've seen some confusion online. This fact is talking about the common hippopotamus, or Hippopotamus amphibius if you're nasty. This isn't about the pygmy hippopotamus. Mudeng may be fierce and have a taste for human flesh, but she and her species aren't the subject of this fact. Also, I'm going to preface this that I'm not saying hippos aren't dangerous. That would be irresponsible. Besides, I was charged by Hippo in one of my Trails Guide training walks in South Africa with clear anger issues. Now quickly, before we dive in, why would hippos even be dangerous to people? Well, they're incredibly large. Males can grow up to be up to 5 meters long, 1.5 meters tall, and be up to 1,500 kilos in weight. Despite the size and weight, they can be incredibly fast both in and out of water, reaching up to 30 kilometers an hour over short distances on land. Not to mention they have incredibly large canines reaching up to 50 centimeters long, which they use for self-defense. Plus, they can be incredibly territorial. With all this in mind, they also come into contact with people quite frequently. Of course, when people share the same rivers and waterways that hippos use, but also at night they come out and graze on land due to their sensitive skin that doesn't protect them well from sunlight. This means they sometimes raid crops, but more importantly, they use the same routes every night, which quickly become warm paths that are perfect for people to use. When on land, a hippo's fight or flight response tells them to get back to the safety of the river as quickly as possible. So, if you bump into one of these while on the paths and you're unfortunate enough to be between the hippo and the river doesn't care and will make sure you're not there for long. So where did the idea that hippos are the deadliest land mammals in Africa, or whatever the subject complement is used, by the person saying it? It gets repeated a lot, online, offline. I remember hearing it from some safari guides whilst living in South Africa, and I've heard it in zoos too. There are even loads of videos about it on this platform. Hippos are the deadliest animal in Africa, or the deadliest land animal, or deadliest mammal. The headlines aren't always consistent. I wonder why. Hell, even the BBC says hippos are the deadliest land mammals, so it must be right. Right? I've been looking into this on and off for a few years now, and I haven't been able to find a definitive source. I even remember reading an article on human-wildlife conflicts in Africa written by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, which had various case studies for different species, and then a footnote. I'm paraphrasing the footnote here. It said something like, for some reason, hippos are considered the deadliest, and we can't figure out why. But we should talk about it a little just in case. Unfortunately, I failed to make a note of this reference when I first wrote this script in 2020, and I haven't been able to find it since. To be fair, it could have actually been a draft version I managed to find of an article I've now used as a source. Speaking of which, all the sources used in this video are in the paste bin in the description. As far as I can tell, this is probably just a truism, likely originating in the 1800s with many European and American explorers and hunters having boating mishaps with hippos. Across the internet, you can find many articles discussing how deadly hippos are. Now quickly, as I mentioned earlier, I've been looking into this on and off for a while. This is actually the second time I'm writing this script. I originally wrote it in 2020. If you search for information on how deadly hippos are, a number that appears a lot is 500 people a year. When I originally wrote this, there were more articles saying 3,000 a year. I can't find many of those anymore. I've tried to find evidence that this used to be the number to convince myself I wasn't making it up. I managed to find a few places, including this Encyclopedia Britannica article which says between 500 and 3,000 people, but with no source. And it's very briefly mentioned in this 10-year-old video on PBS's Be Smart YouTube channel.
The lion, or even the hippopotamus. It's so small, in fact, that it could sit.
So that used to be the cited number people use. There is also this article on a US blogging website called Oddie, that says 2,900, and it has a source. The Straight Dope, a website that used to be a column in the Chicago Reader newspaper. That old reliable source. Except This article doesn't even give a number and just says they are considered the most dangerous animal in Africa, not counting mosquitoes. However, evidence that the cited number of deaths did change at some point in the last 4 years or so is in an article I found on Fox News. I know. Written in 2017 about a pod of hippos being destroyed in Niger. This article notes that 3,000 people were killed each year by hippos, according to data compiled by Mother Nature Network. Spoiler alert, with a name like that, they didn't compile anything. Anyway, it's sourced. Mother Nature Network is now called Tree Hugger, of course it is, and they're both sustainability blogs. Anyway, the sourced page doesn't say 3,000, it says 500, but it was apparently updated in August 2020. Okay. Using the Wayback Machine, they happen to have a snapshot of this website just before this article was updated, and it says, drumroll please, 2,900 deaths a year with no reference.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Hang on, 2,900 is the number Oddie said and cited a website with no numbers on, and Fox, which cited this website, said 3,000, which was apparently never said here. Oh, God. So this number wasn't always consistent and has been changed everywhere since I first wrote this script. Sorry, I got a bit lost down the rabbit hole trying to make sure that I did in fact read 3,000 and this wasn't some sort of fever dream. Anyway, it now says 500, and so does everywhere that gives a number. Regardless, we will come to the same conclusion as to whether it was 500 or 3,000. I just thought I'd try and be accurate. Now, 500 deaths a year by the hands of hippos. Hooves of hippos? Well, actually the teeth of hippos? Anyway, this is the number that everyone uses now. So, where did this come from? Oh wait, Tree Hugger has a source for this number, and it's Animals Asia. Brilliant! Article dated 2019, and it says 500 deaths, and it has no source. Brilliant. After trawling through as many articles as I could find that give numbers to justify the statement that hippos are the deadliest animal in Africa, many of them don't have sources, but the few that do always seem to eventually lead back to this, I guess, op-ed on the BBC News website from 2016, which says, kills an estimated 500 people per year, with no source. And the article has no author, but it's the BBC. So it must be correct talking about animal facts. There's even an article written on Discover Wildlife, the website for the BBC Wildlife magazine, that says hippos kill an estimated 500 people per year. No source. Sorry. Compared to only 22 for lions. But I found this paper printed in the scientific journal Oryx, studying human-wildlife conflict in only Mozambique over admittedly a 27-month period, sourcing data from 2007, which shows 24 people killed by lions in that period. Now that's for one specific country and over 2 years, but I find it hard to believe that the total number in the entire continent would only be 22, the BBC. Side note, this same journal also shows hippos killed half as many people as lions did. Okay. I've said these claim numbers don't come from anywhere. So, what is the real number? Well, I don't have one. But I can tell you with confidence that hippos aren't the deadliest animal in Africa. And you might say, how can you know this? What if those numbers are correct? Well, let's take a walk down logic lane. Let's assume that the approximate number of 500 people killed by hippos a year is correct. They simply aren't the deadliest because the numbers of people killed by lions and crocodiles in Africa is largely underreported, importantly, both being carnivores and hippos are herbivores. Now, I hear some of you typing, actually, hippos aren't herbivores because there's this video of hippos doing this or eating that. I've seen it in tons of places where hippos are talked about. Hippos are herbivores. Hippos don't hunt. They don't have the stomach anatomy to process meat. The videos of them appearing to consume meat are either due to nutrient deficiencies or some other non-typical behaviour. They are herbivores. Anyway, the main contenders, lions and crocodiles. Firstly, crocodiles. There are actually 4 species of crocodiles in Africa: the Nile crocodile, the West African crocodile, the African slender-snouted crocodile, and the African dwarf crocodile. When I say crocodiles, I'm speaking about the Nile and West African crocodile, which were considered to be the same species until recently. A published article on human-wildlife conflict in Africa by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations does a great job in discussing this. I was actually able to find this one again and source it. They found 2 unpublished documents by authorities, one in Zambia and one in Mozambique in 2003, both stating, even though data collection was sparse, that crocodiles caused the greatest number of deaths in both those countries. Apparently, in Mozambique, many of the deaths go unreported because it's difficult for people to get to government offices, and the FAO estimated in 2005 that 300 people were killed by crocodiles in Mozambique alone. That's almost as many as the continent-wide estimate for hippos. The FAO paper even cites an article written by... I'm going to butcher that name. The article was written by... in 1987, which says attacks on humans by crocodiles are often ascribed to witchcraft, and that these crocodiles that attack humans aren't considered by the families involved to be real crocodiles, so might be less likely to be reported. Now, let's move on to the second contender, the African lion, Panthera leo, if you're nasty. I'm going to be using the same FAO paper again because it does a very good job of collating human-wildlife conflict in Africa, and I would have used all the same I would have found and used all the same sources again. I've checked them. They report a few interesting country-specific statistics. Firstly, they found that in a single province in Mozambique, over an 18-month period between 2001 and 2002, 70 people were reported to have been killed by lions. They also mentioned that in Tanzania, which has the highest population of lions in the world, that between 1990 and 2004, 563 people were killed by lions. That's, on average, 40 deaths per year. From these 2 specific locations, you could get an estimate of 110 deaths by lion per year, and they are much wider spread than these 2 very specific locations. The FAO report also alludes to something very important. They mention a book by the investigative journalist Robert Frump called The Man-Eaters of Eden, that between 1996 and 1997, at least 11 illegal immigrants were killed by lions while walking from Mozambique to South Africa through the north of Kruger National Park, since there's no border fence between the 2 countries there. This is very likely an underestimate. Mentioned in the book, there were only concrete evidence for these 11 occurrences. Also, in the book Shaping Kruger by Mitch Riordan, who was a ranger in South Africa and Namibia, he writes that Kruger has a history of man-eating lions, but specifically due to how illegal immigrants used the north of Kruger to enter South Africa. Firstly, from Mozambique, where by 1993 an estimated 1.7 million people were entering a year, and later refugees from Zimbabwe. The man-eating quickly became a known occurrence. Writing, rangers on patrol began finding scraps of bloody clothing in the middle of nowhere, a single shoe, an abandoned suitcase full of possessions, footprints that suddenly just ended, and occasionally the remains of consumed corpses. He later states the number of people killed by lions in the Kruger is officially unknown. But with the numbers of people entering, that's a lot of opportunities. This leads me on to my very simple logical note to be made here, as to why recorded numbers of deaths by crocodile or lion is almost certainly understated and much higher than deaths by hippopotamus. The difference in attack. As mentioned before, hippos are herbivores. When they kill someone, it's because they feel threatened or in defense, and there will be a body. When a crocodile or a lion attacks a human, it's for food, and in the vast majority of cases, there won't be a body left. A good source for statistics on the numbers of deaths from hippos, lions, crocodiles, etc. would be police databases, for example. However, as a general legal rule, deaths are only recorded if there's a body. If there is no body, as is usually the case with carnivores, they can only be reported as missing, and there will be no reason for their missing. In many countries, you have presumption of death, which can occur after a period of time where there is no sign of the person. For example, in the United States and the UK, this is 7 years. In Germany, Italy and Poland, this is 10 years. However, again, in South Africa it used to be 7 years, but now there is no period, and a case needs to be made to the government to convince them. In the paste bin in the description, which has all the sources I've used in this video, I have my references, which include 3 examples of missing people cases in South Africa, where someone who suffered from depression went missing for 2 years, they were not deemed dead. Another person who was missing for 30 years, and that wasn't enough evidence for death. On the other hand, someone who went swimming in the sea and was missing for a relatively short period of time was presumed dead. This need for an application is the same in several African nations as far as I could find. So many deaths would be unlikely to reach any statistical source, not to mention the cases of illegal immigrants who no one would report. So, are hippos the deadliest animals in Africa? Absolutely not. There is no evidence to say they are. There is at least a little evidence showing lions and crocodiles are more deadly, and it's simply logical that hippos aren't the deadliest. It's just bad PR for an amazing creature. Where did this bad press start? I don't know. Maybe I'll try and figure it out for another video. Are hippos dangerous though? Of course they are. As with every animal, they should be given the space and respect they deserve. Every animal has the ability to be dangerous. It reminds me of a very simple conversation I've heard a few times. Excuse me, can this animal bite? Does it have a mouth? Yes. Then it can bite? Thank you for watching. If you've made it to the end, why not give the video a like? Or subscribe to the channel. Start a conversation down in the comments. YouTube loves interactions and promotes videos the more they're interacted with. I have plenty more videos like this planned, and I would love to make them, and the more people who watch and support the channel make it easier for me to make these videos. Bye.